Hello, everyone, and welcome to the No Holds Barred Witchcraft podcast. So, you may or may not have heard last week's podcast, which was all about the TV series Supernatural. And in it, in the podcast, Chris made a statement. That statement was, all angels are dicks. So today's podcast is all about angels, really working with angels, not all of this love and light new age stuff about angel
Angel
reading. They've
cards.
only got your best, you've only got your best of intentions, love and light crap. Chris, defend your statement. Why are all angels dicks?
Largely I don't like working with them is partly why, but they are mainly because they are dicks. And the reason for that is they're soldiers. They are, you know, cogs of the universe and therefore act like cogs or dicks. Um, very limited intelligence is part of the argument, I guess. They just do as they're
Well, I
told.
don't know. I mean, in my experience, dicks just tend to do what they want to do,
Uh,
whereas soldiers do what they're told to do.
Oh, but see, that's oversharing. But dicks do what I tell them to do, in my experience of life. So they don't have any control of their own. They're under my control.
Okay. So what are we defining as an angel? What is an angel? What is the job of an angel and how many angels are there?
Too many.
Talk about angels. Talk about
Too
angels.
many. Oh, they. Come on, you like angels far more than I do, and you don't like them either.
Well, I only like one of them. I don't get on all that well with them, but if I tell them to do something, they have a tendency to do it other than a certain one that you had a problem with with I think yesterday, wasn't it?
Oh, this week I've got somewhat of an infestation, but
An angel
yeah,
infestation.
at least that's what I consider it to be.
And who do you call when you've got an angel infestation?
Well, to be fair, I haven't done anything with it. I've just left it where it is because it's not my problem.
What, the
Yeah,
angel? Is it bound and hogtied in a cupboard somewhere?
maybe.
I can just imagine some poor angel. What angel is it that you've got bound hogtied in the room next door?
There's an aspect of Michael in there.
So you've got Michael, the witch's angel, the most popular one.
Yeah, bound and hogtied in the next room.
And what did he ever do to you? Or it?
Hanging around far too much is the problem.
But I don't understand. Isn't Michael a super powerful archangel that could, you know, destroy Lucifer, that minor Venusian deity? Um, how can you, a simple witch, have the power to bind and hogtie St. Michael?
Like I said, it's an aspect of him. I didn't say it was the whole thing. The whole thing is not in the room.
Well, what have you done with the whole thing? Have you chopped him up like some kind of, I don't know, Freddy Krueger serial killer? Is there bits of him all over the place?
Well, it's a stream of power, isn't it? It's a stream of energy. Don't make it out like I'm a crazy person.
Well, can you explain the anatomy of an angel then? How do angels work? And there seems to be much like with demons and that, a hierarchy of people assigning different angels and different jobs and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
it's a complicated machine, but it's going to be, isn't it? Because it's very too much. Um, it's been categorized too many times, I think, by how it's formulated. But for me, it all fits within one stream. They're all part of the solar story, etc. But so therefore, it's a very organized perception of perfection. Do you like that one?
Okay, that's interesting. So would you think of like angels as a race of spirit, a classification of
Yeah,
spirit? Like you might say jinn or fae or something like
yeah.
that.
They obviously have their own
So what is their
subcategories.
so what's their jobs then?
Well, their jobs are to keep everything
And who's in
ticking.
charge?
Well, it's the big guy in it, Santa Claus.
Mechanisms of the universe is normally how I describe
Yeah,
them. They're the mechanisms of the universe. Hall monitors on
hall
steroids.
monitor. I like that one. Hall monitors on steroids. Yeah, do this, don't do that.
Now, if you were to work with an angel, and I wouldn't ever suggest that you do, because I know that you wouldn't like that. But if you were to work with an angel, or if you have a student, for example, who says that they definitely want to work with angels, what format do you see that taken? Because I think certainly since I've known you, you don't seem to work a lot with angels, but the only time you ever get involved with angels is because of students
Yeah,
working with them, and the students seem to fall into this trap of, I'll just do whatever the angel tells me because the angel knows best.
yes.
So do you agree with that way of
I don't
working
like
with
that process
angels?
at all, Ian. You know that. Um, so the reason,
Well, the listeners
so the
don't.
reason, the reason I know that, the reason I don't like that, is down to the fact that that's not the purpose they fulfill. So whereas, although they have, like I said earlier, when I say limited intelligence, I mean that certain levels of them have certain levels of sentience, um, and depending on which level of the hierarchy you are dealing with, will depend on how you approach them. Um, there are bog standard angels that just, like you say, hall monitors on steroids, and then you've got the ones that kind of, are the deputy head teachers of that said school. You know, they're still just as useless, but they're pencil pushers. Um,
They got a
but they got
title.
a title, yeah. So,
And underlings.
and underlings, yeah, they've got other entities to push around somewhat.
Like demons.
Yeah. Well, there are mirrors in the world. Anyway, but yeah, so when I've had clients and mentees that want to work with them, I don't discourage, but I do explain a few things. And the sorts of things I will tend to explain is one, there's none of this praying rubbish. Like that you don't ask an angel to do something, you tell an angel to do something. Like I said, they are cogs of the universe, and soldiers is probably the best way to describe them, which is they're always prepared for a battle that never happens. That kind of that kind of soldier, like the modern day soldier. I don't mean the warrior class of the Vikings or something. I'm not talking about warriors that have actually seen battle recently. These are ones that are sat round, keeping those muscles looking tidy, but they never actually use them. Not sure if they could if they were had to. Like, like they look like the soldier, but are they actually capable of lifting anything anymore?
Well, I mean, some would say that they underpin creation, so therefore, if they all went on strike, like you talked about head teachers and principals and that, if they all went on strike like the teachers' union tells them to do, would the universe start to mess up and start to, you know, unwrap? Would you just get agency
You'd
staff
just
in at
get
that
agency
point then?
staff in, wouldn't you? Some of the spirit.
So who are the agency staff?
Well, you'd pull in spirits from other.
The demons.
For that level of reality, I think that gets too complicated to discuss, Liam. You know that.
Okay, let's go back. Let's go back then. Let's start from the very beginning because that's a very good place to start. So, in the beginning, God so say created the heaven and the earth. Which God are we talking about? Or are we talking about God's plural, as in the book of Genesis in the Bible says, let us?
Yes. No. I,
So, are you saying that angels are the mechanisms of this universe and this creation, or would you say their office expands further than that?
I find them quite limited to this reality. Does that make more sense than if I say this universe?
Yeah, I think so.
So it's a case of they fulfill. There is you know exactly what I mean, but it's trying to explain it to everybody else. So the you me and you would talk about energy streams, and we would talk about the faces of that energy stream.
Yeah.
For me, with the way that Christianity has evolved over the last couple of thousand years, they have imprinted a certain race of creatures known as angels upon that reality of those energy streams. And for me, that's what they complete. Those energy streams would continue to go without them, because if you remove the angel, you're just removing that face, that look upon that mechanism. It doesn't mean the energy stream would stop flowing because there is too many others in that same energy stream. So no, if you took out the angel, you wouldn't necessarily unpin the universe. You might unpin a certain level of reality for a large quantity of people on the planet, that would then have to readjust, that wouldn't necessarily have access to a certain energy field that they're used to having access to, therefore would affect their reality.
Okay.
Does that explain it better?
I don't think that explains it better. I think you said more words, but I think the people that didn't understand your first point probably aren't going to
Oh,
understand that
great.
one. So let's move on, and then maybe we can pick up on that again after laying some foundations. So, how does one command an angel then? Do angels, like soldiers, just listen to the person with the most penises on their shoulder? Because that's how we know the military grades, those little penis chevrons. The more you have, the more you can command. Did they just listen to the biggest dick swinger in the room?
Oh, I suppose so, to a certain extent.
Or
That's why
will
I
they
don't
just
like
listen to
them.
anyone that stands up to them?
At the end of the day, there is always that test, isn't there, when you're dealing with any new spirit, as to whether or not they trust is the best word I can come up with, but that's not exactly necessarily what it is it? Um, there is an understanding that is reached between you and any energy, um, any sentient energy. And again, I think that's how it works. Again, with angels, angels will openly give information because they like to talk. Whether or not that information, whether or not that information is useful, is a different matter, and what you do with that information is entirely up to you. I think that's why I find angel cards and things like that, and people who work with angels a lot, very airy fairy, very loosely. How do what the word I'm after?
Easily led. There are new agey type people that are very often easily led and always looking for a master. The problem is
Yeah.
when you give something else who is looking, so an angel, for example, is always looking for a master. If you tell that or ask that what you should be doing, is basically like
Wait,
asking the
yeah.
hall monitor,
Well, you
what am I
could.
supposed to be
Your
doing?
options are these, and these. Take one. I don't know. Yeah, like that's kind of how I get it. And I've never enjoyed them. Like, and you know how much I despise tarot cards, but I still prefer them to an angel card. At least if you ask a tarot deck something, it's going to give you an answer. Whereas I find you'll get a series of proverbs from a kind of angel, an angel oracle card of some description. It's kind of like, you know, what is there a new man in my life? And then you'll get an answer that goes something along the lines of, there are always new masculine energies around. Well, answer the question then. Like, what are you actually? So the way in which people interact with them, I think, says a lot about their energy. Is like you say, they're waiting for somebody to say, "Tell me this, do that." move there.
But I find that that's more than likely lower forms of angels. So when you see ceremonial magic and witches that evoke and work with angels as opposed to these kind of angel readers and that in the New Age, they tend to just go straight to what they perceive as the top, so archangels. Most of the time, it's like, I'm going to evoke the Archangel Michael to guard my Wiccan circle, or I'm going to do this for that, or, that kind of thing. So, from what the perspective that I see them trying to do, is they're trying to take a pure power that they think that they understand
Yeah,
and ask it or tell it, because there's a real difference there. With ceremonial magicians would normally tell it what to
yeah.
do, whereas I've seen a lot in a lot of these modern neo-Wiccan circles,
It's
they
a
call it
petition.
in and ask it, can you guard this circle, or come here and guard this, that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So yeah, it does seem to be a little bit more petition led. Um, but in terms of like the uses for that, I mean, we could talk about where the individual practitioners are coming
yeah.
from, because of course the psychology of that factors in. If you're someone like the majority of Wiccans, let's be fair, were raised in Christian countries.
Yes.
Or if they weren't raised Christian, they're raised in the West and therefore quite, have Western ideals. So
But
they'll
there's a
think of,
distinct kind of
well,
Christian feel to the way those countries are run
yeah.
and moralized.
So it's kind of like, well, there's some energy out there that you would consider to be God, and then what actually does the work is the angels. So you're like God, the CEO, and then the archangels are the heads of the departments, and then under them you've got various other angels, and then you've got all the baddies, which are basically the demons. That's how a lot of people, I think, see it,
Yeah,
as not necessarily how we would see it. And certainly when it comes to witches working within certain pantheons
yeah.
and stuff like that, you'll find the angels don't react
No.
particularly well to things that are, well, really in contrast to their assigned job roles.
Yeah.
So if you're trying to tinker with something, they don't much like
Most
it.
people see it as kind of two pyramids kind of inverted one on top of the other, whereas actually it's more likely a dodecahedron. Like that's kind of how I see it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
You've got circles within circles that kind of overlap and build in order to function, more like the Metatron star or whatever they call it.
So for someone that doesn't really, would you, if you had someone, a client that says, look, I don't really respond all that well and don't resonate much with all this witchcraft, like I don't really resonate with any of the religions, but for some reason I'm drawn to
Yeah.
the angelic realms, angelic magic, that kind of thing. What advice would you give them? Because it's not like you're probably going to turn around and say, well, no, don't touch that.
No, if that's if
But
that's
at the same time, you
if
know,
that's where they're drawn, then I'm not going to stop. I would probably start it with a disclaimer that says something along the lines of, I don't like working this system. I'll only be able to take you so far, and then kind of I would either have to educate myself, do a couple of new downloads, or um, or invite somebody else that understands that system better to kind of co-opt with me in order to help that person push them further. But the advice would probably be the same as anything else if you were to work the goetic system or whatever, is that you start with one that's drawn to you and branch outwards. So
mm,
start with one individual spirit, not trying to work the whole system straight away. Find a particular spirit from that group that is there, drawing you in, and start working from there. Um, Obviously, giving them certain advice about, which is angels, I guess, for me work so well with that kind of very structured um, ceremonial work. Like it is, I find the angels respond well to that arrangement, because it's one they understand. It's very
Yeah,
Christian, shall we say, for lack of a better word.
yeah.
It has that kind,
It's essentially Abrahamic,
yeah,
isn't
it's
it?
Abrahamic.
It's Abrahamic.
And therefore that structure is something you would have to apply. So my traditional way of teaching, which is very more free flowing organic, would not work well with that, and therefore I'd have to give that advice to that person, is that you are going to have to work in a very structured way until you understand what's going on, and even probably after then. Does that sound fair?
Yeah, I think that when I see people that work with angels and angelic systems of magic, such as the John Dee and Edward Kelly's Enochian system, it relies heavily on the angel's in charge and knows more than what I know, therefore I'm going to listen to the angel. And I think that most people that get on really well with angelic work tend to think of it as, well, I'm the king and you're my subject. You do a specific job, I will phone the person up that is responsible for that job because I want something altered.
Exactly.
So they normally would take the position of the CEO, contacting the relevant department to get done what they want to get done project wise. I think the problems often come from working with things like angels as the point of, or from the perspective of, well, this is some awesomely powerful thing that knows far more than what I know. And the trap you'd fall into is, oh, well, I'll just do what it says to do. And it has a very, very, very biased opinion, I tend to find angels do. And the problem with, again, the kind of where they come from, the Abrahamic kind of religions, is that, well, if the angel's working for the big man upstairs or woman upstairs or entity upstairs, then surely the angel's going to tell me what is right and what is wrong
Yeah,
and what I should or shouldn't be doing. And that can be a dangerous.
yeah. I I think that's partly why I don't get on with it, is that the system works outside of others, and I don't like that. Whereas the other ones, other systems, like if you were to go and follow, I don't know, a Norse tradition or whatever, then it would overlap and can be overlaid onto the others. Whereas when I find that people try to do that with an Enochian pathway, um, I don't feel they line up as well as they're trying to do. So I feel the concepts that are at the core of individual angels do not match up. Um, like, when, for example, the bit that never sits well with me is when you assign elements to the archangels. I
All
understand,
the
yeah, I
correspondences.
understand from a cardinal points way of doing that and going that one in the north, that one in the south. The problem I have is in those moments they become a set of correspondences that obviously it's in that corner, therefore it must mean X, Y, Z. You know, um, it's in one particular corner of that corner means water, that corner means this, that corner means that, and therefore they're almost assigning all that to that one entity that doesn't necessarily
Yeah,
fit. So I wouldn't myself, as it gets easier when you have someone like Michael being assigned to a fire situation. You can kind of see a loose connection, flaming sword, all that kind of crap, but he doesn't he doesn't hold that energy form for me. So when I think of Michael, I don't think of all the things I think of with elementals themselves and what they
yeah,
represent. Whereas I will think, when I think of Michael, I think of, brute power, force. I don't necessarily think of the more poetic shapes of fire and flame and smoke and those kind of much more organic processes don't exist in Michael for me. So I think that's where I have the disjoint of, you were trying to add something quite, floaty and poetic to something that is quite rigid.
Yeah, well, a lot of the magical systems and that people research in the West evolve from ceremonial magic, and that's a very rigid system that's designed for you to move past. So
Yeah,
it's designed, supposed to be designed basically for two reasons. One is to keep the knowledge from the person that's reading the
yeah,
book, so coded work, and the second is to take the work out of putting together and designing the ritual. It's designed by a practitioner for someone to copy.
okay,
It's essentially copying the answers in the back of the textbook or the exercise book. You don't really understand why, you just understand, well, I need to put this answer here. And when you think about the evolutions, particularly that happened in the 20th century, where you've then got various different systems that people try to
yeah,
interchange. So they'll try to keep the idea of the Wiccan idea of circle casting. And it's like, well, if I want to work with another system, I just cast a circle and just transpose
yeah,
this to
yeah,
that.
exactly.
As a kind of like, well, that doesn't quite work out. And when they try to mash all of these various systems together to expand their current system,
Yes,
now when you're talking about the organic way that you sort of spoke about earlier, is forming a relationship with a specific angel that is relevant to what you're doing, and then the working relationship one from then ends up teaching you quite a lot about the energies of angels in general, if you're sensitive enough to that. And then also, you're just factoring in other personalities. If you discover a new race for the first time, say you've never met a human before and you're some weirdo alien, you will learn a certain amount from speaking and communicating with and seeing one human,
yeah.
but
And then watching
and
how
that will
they
teach you a lot
interact with
about
the others.
humans. Yeah. So that's basically what I'd say in terms of angels is the system in itself. I'd say that it's a system that you can utilize, I think, partly because you have to. Once you evolve magically to a certain extent, you're going to end up bumping into angelic energies and
Yeah,
angels. I mean, I know from our perspective, because our profession involves us working with other people's systems of magic, but in general, I mean, even other practitioners that don't work with angels, they'll end up bumping into them and that sort of thing if they're causing a big enough ripple effect on the universe and causing all sorts of things. Because you've got the little hall monitors that are going about doing their
yeah,
business. It's just the point that normally it can be a bit worrying when someone starts off with just that energy because it's so hierarchical and an underlining kind of morality and um, way of doing things that you don't really get with other systems of magic and deities and spirits and stuff. Like you said, rigid.
yeah. I just, like I said, I would never kind of force somebody off the system. But it's obviously it's advising someone of the traps of it, isn't it? Which is that, it is rigid, it's hierarchical. If you don't operate very well within those systems, then that's not going to suit you. But, yes, I would hope that by exploring that system, they would eventually come across, the flip side of that, which is if you work with angels doesn't mean you're going to stop noting other entities around. It's just that, I don't know, people to a certain extent, I think after they've worked with angels for a long time, become a little tone deaf to other frequencies.
Yeah.
Um, and I think that kind of is the limitation that worries me most, is that kind of they get used to working in one frequency and one frequency only. And I think that limits the possibilities. I know that's fine for most people because they don't need to push a boundary as far as they like. Um, I just, if you're one of those people that wants to keep tinkering, I don't think that an angelic system is going to allow you that. If you're wanting a nice, safe system,
Well, I think we're actually just about to run out of time for the regular podcast, so we'll have to say goodbye to our normal people.